Welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, where today we will continue our overview of the several liberal arts and sciences with geometry.
Ladies and gentlemen, brethren all, welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, a casual conversation around Freemasonry. First, it's important to note that our thoughts and opinions are our own and do not reflect those of our Grand Lodge or respective craft or concordant bodies. Please connect with us and ask questions via our website at theworkingtoolspodcast.com.
Today on the Working Tools Podcast, we have a very worshipful brother, David Colbeth from King Solomon Lodge number 60 in Auburn, Washington. And I'm Matt Appel, and I'm a member of Mill Creek number 243, and we meet in Montlake Terrace, Washington. And Stephen is not here this evening. He has an emergency he had to tend to, so we hope everything goes well with him. But we are going to do our best to soldier on without him and wrap up our we started with an overview. I was going to say vague, but it's not vague. Overview of all the seven liberal arts and sciences. We sort of skipped over geometry in our last episode, so we wanted to touch on that before we try to go a little more in depth on them. So, David, actually, just before we started recording, you were saying about geometry being the root of all sciencey things.
Well, yeah, in that last segment, we talked about a paper that had been written by Brother Johnston, Right Worship Brother Johnston, that Steve had found, and so we kind of hit all the different elements, like as you mentioned, except geometry, and I remember exactly how we put it, but I think I kind of swayed us to say, hey, let's save that one for last, because in the short talk bulletin that we use, that we're going to talk about tonight a little more, this article on the seven liberal arts and sciences really focuses. It's by the way, it's volume, how to read this here, volume 22, number 5 from May 1944, the short talk bulletin, seven liberal arts and sciences, and it really goes into depth on the ideas of the seven liberal arts and sciences, and then really focuses on geometry being the main element of the seven liberal arts and sciences, really the focus. And he has a quote in here from Cook, from the Cook manuscript, and it says, especially geometry, the first cause of all the other sciences. And so he said, wherever shall they be, the seven sciences are grammar, rhetoric, in that version, dialect, which is logic, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. But yeah, geometry is a really key component of the seven liberal arts and sciences, which in general that was the education base, right? That was kind of what, and I think too, when Freemasonry started, it sounds like from these articles and from what we read that Freemasonry started and their foundation was the seven liberal arts and sciences, because that was considered the full education or true education.
Yeah, and so geometry is one of the quadrivium, the more advanced arts and sciences. So it's definitely, I guess I in my head I can see how geometry relates clearly to astronomy, for instance, but I don't know. I'm sure there's some music in there somewhere, and I'm not being a music guy. I don't know what it is, so I will say the tie to music always seemed a little tenuous to me. But I know there's math in music, obviously, but it's geometry per se.
Yeah, I guess I don't know how that would work either. And hopefully, maybe when we get into talk about the music, we can maybe figure out what the connection there is. And if anybody out there listening, if they have an idea of what, how music and or geometry ties into music, let us know. That'd be great. I know we had, just to digress a little bit, I was at a meeting in Right Worship am I drawing a blank? Roger Nelson, our senior grand. Yeah, that guy. We have been talking at one point about the different smells. We were talking about in chapter 5, 6, or 7 of the Observing the Craft. We were saying how there's different scents involved in the different degrees, and so he pulled me aside at a meeting recently and said, "Hey, I was listening to the show, and you can find all this stuff in the Scottish Rite and the Kabbalah, and there's all there's different." He was excited, and I was not in a moment to listen. I need to get back with him and ask him more about that. But so there's if there's listeners out there that have better ideas or other ideas, please, we'd love to have that feedback and post aside. But I don't claim to be an expert in any of this stuff. We're just kind of exploring it and figuring it out and having fun at it. So
Yeah. I mean, I can see how. So I don't know. There was one of the articles we read. I should know which one so that I could reference it properly. But one of the articles we read was saying that geometry, that was it, much of math was born out of a need in the classical period, was born out of architecture. Like they wanted to build a building, they wanted it to be strong. They said, hey, what are the traits of a strong building? Well, the columns are this big around, or for every X number of height, it has to be this wide, because if you build it tall and skinny, it falls over, and that sort of thing. And so a lot of math was born out of that, and a lot of that is geometry. So I guess if you sort of start with geometry and then go to arithmetic, then music maybe.
well, and you have to have. I made a note in here. I know we're kind of blending into the next article a little bit too, but uh, we should have a balance of the scientific learning as well as liberal arts. And so I think even though in the article it talks about how there was a focus on education being more scientific or more business oriented, so that depending on where you might end up in life. And but what about the liberal arts? What about music and other things? So I think you need to have that balance to be able to understand all things, if you will, and to have that complete education. But yeah, it in the article that Steve had shown, it was, he quotes that geometry is synonymous with self-knowledge, the understanding of basic substance of being. And so if you're able, I think it's the idea of conceptualizing too. Geometry is very, very conceptual, visual, and it's thought-provoking, and it's not just where mathematics is really more focused on the number side of it, where geometry and algebra and things like that are more focused on. And I didn't do very much beyond that, so I don't even know what calculus and all those other. uh, but
I did once upon a time, 30 years ago. I was pretty good at that stuff.
Yeah, right, right. And my daughter was going through it recently in high school, and I'm thinking, oh, don't come ask me for any of that stuff.
Yeah, Henry's. Well, I mean, I majored in math in college, so
Oh wow.
I used to know math. And yeah, they'll ask Charlotte. We used to ask me a question, or had asked me a question, or whatever. I'm like, yeah, those words sound familiar to me. There's something in there, but yeah, I can't help you.
Yeah. Yeah, but I
It's
think
not.
it helps.
It's like a language. It's not something you use every
It
day, so
is.
it goes away.
That's a great way to put it. It is like language, which I'm surprised they haven't considered math or geometry or things like that as a foreign language. I mean, I know that there's been some schools that have allowed computer science or computer programming to be suffice as a foreign language substitute.
Really,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I for one welcome our robot overlords.
So that would be interesting. It is surprising that that's not, but I guess foreign language is a supplemental, whereas math and algebra and those math and sciences are all core anyway. So you have to have those. So it's not like they're not requiring it, but that's a good way to put it. I like that. He talks about in the article on the seven levels of hot, so he said that there's not a lot written about geometry or about seven liberal arts and sciences, and it's true that it's a little thin out there. I think you mentioned that in the last show. I mean, there's some stuff out there, but it is surprising. And he said that even when Mackey was doing research on it, he pulled a lot of information on non-Masonic resources. And my comment was, well, why recreate the wheel? If there's some good resources and good information out there about it, why do we need to make it Masonic? I mean, I guess that's who we are and what we try to do, right? We always try to make everything Masonic, but I don't know if
Yeah,
it's
Masons will
necessary.
spin about anything as a as a bit of masonry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's the well, yeah, I've commented on it before. The need of Masons to claim everything for masonry is, which I guess every group does on some level. It's like the Greek guy in my big fat Greek wedding. What this word comes from this word, which is Greek for.
And to the Romans, not the Greeks. Yeah,
No, the Greeks, not the Romans, right?
yeah,
Either
yeah.
way. But yeah, I remember someone saying once. I'm getting off topic here terribly, but the the Greeks did more math for math's sake, which is why today we know of Pythagoras and yeah, other Greek people who were into mathematics whose names I cannot think of right now. But nobody knows any Egyptian or mathematicians because Egypt did math like, oh crap, we need a way to measure our pyramid, and they would figure that out, and then they would stop.
uh,
Whereas the Greeks would sort of, yeah, that means kind of thing, and go on from there.
Continual thought process or other abstract ideas. How can you use this? Or
And I have no idea if that's true or not. Somebody told me that. So it must be true. Stuck in my brain.
sounds good. Yeah, the article previous to it also talks that geometry is the teaches lessons of the right behavior, rectitude, and truthfulness. And so again, I think that there is some parallels you could draw. We use the square and the plumb and the level to as symbols of our degrees and symbols of things in our who we are, what we are, and those are all related to geometric tools. And so, um, yeah, there's definitely some crossover for sure.
So one of the articles that we've been talking about, well, that you've been talking about, because I'm a little behind as usual, was the short talk bulletin titled "The Seven Liberal Arts and Sciences" from Carl Claudy from 1944, which I interestingly, there's a bit in here where someone is griping about the modern education system, that the tendency in schools nowadays from 1944, and I'm thinking, next year will be 2024, and
Well,
we're
at the
still
very
in
end
the
of the
same
article, I
place.
wrote this thing was written in 80 years ago. So yeah, yeah,
Actually, I should say by the time this is out, it will be 2024.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, in this short talk bulletin, which is excellent, if I can add it, I think it is worth a read if anyone out there is looking for something to start to take one's education in the seven liberal arts and sciences on. Yeah, so we have he has a quote here from Dr. Oliver Day Street, and says that to anyone except a Freemason, and to the great majority of them, the idea that geometry inculcates moral truth is utterly foreign and incomprehensible. So essentially, he's saying that your average man on the street and a fair percentage of Masons, or a great majority of Masons, as he says in there, that don't even ever make the connection between geometry and morality and moral teachings.
And like we were just talking about, though, the evidence of that is directly within our symbolism and in our teachings. I mean, square and compass and the the plumb and the level. I mean, all of that kind of the basics of who we are as Freemasons and the symbolism directly connects to geometry and directly teaches them moral lessons. I mean, if you ask a guy what does the plumb represent, well, more rectitude. I mean, that should be the one line answer.
Yeah, I think the fear amongst some is, whether founded or unfounded, I will leave that to the individual Mason to decide, is that there are a lot of Masons out there who don't consider the symbols or the meaning of it at all. I mean, pretty much
Mhm.
beyond the what is in the lectures, or even what's in the lectures, they just sort of snooze through.
Yeah,
And it's that age-old article from the 1800s about the Masons who read and the Masons who don't read, right?
yeah. I think you said it once on a show that a lot of Masons they get into lodge, put on their apron, sit down, and go to sleep, and then they wake up again at the sound of the gavel in the east when they're coming back to it. And it's especially during the opening and closing, they just tune out when that's supposed to be an opportunity to change your outlook on life essentially and to retune yourself into the ideas of learning and expansion of your mind and uh, 'cause that's what I was taught is that the opening and closing rituals are supposed to do that for you, right? They're supposed to uh, allow you an opportunity to separate yourself from the outside world.
Yeah, he talks in the article about, how the people don't apply. So philosophy being not, uh, I'm not saying this clearly. philosophy being a almost a lost art, sort of, as the
Yeah, for sure. We say
as the
like
word.
one in a million people is a philosopher. I think
Right,
that was what he mentioned. One in a million people is a philosopher. There's lots of learned people, but only a very small percentage of those are philosophers.
right, exactly. Considering not just the facts of something, but the why is
Hmm.
a big question that he talks about here. The why as opposed to the how
Yeah,
in
yeah.
sciences.
The problems of philosophy, from whence came man, which is one of our opening lines in a very popular name of a podcast. From whence came you? What is man? What is time? What is space? What is notion? What is matter? And kind of like you were mentioning me earlier, that the Greeks, that they didn't just solve the problem, they probably asked these kind of questions in their expansion of their knowledge of mathematics and other areas. And so, while that's where I think geometry, going kind of tying back in what we were talking about earlier, geometry is that expansion. It's not just a simple one and one plus one is two. It's y is one and y is one plus one two, and couldn't it be something else? You know.
I will say, just to undermine my previous argument, the the never let it be said I can't argue both sides of something that I say. The moral lessons are out there and don't have to be made through masonry, I would argue. I mean,
Oh, sure.
there are moral people out there who are not masons,
Yeah.
but this uh, scheme we have is a way to direct ourselves to those moral lessons. And as I say frequently, there are many paths up the mountain, and just because this is our path doesn't mean that all the other ones are crap.
Well, no, that's true. And I've often not thought too that even though there were different ideas of morality over the ages, for some reason, Freemasonry has been able to endeavor and continues to be um, an area that men especially can focus on. And I don't know if it's because it's men only, if that's why it's really, and it has good processes and good systems in place. So, uh, but yeah, we're not the only, you can go to a church or you can go to other religious elements and or just self-study. There's lots of opportunity and lots of ways, like you said, to develop yourself and to learn those teachings. And it's interesting, he quotes in here that philosophy changes as civilization changes. And so, yeah, I would agree. Our ideas on philosophy and ideas on beliefs and religion and other elements of moral code and things maybe has to some extent changed, although I think the fundamentals, the roots of most of those are still with us. Whether you believe in the Ten Commandments or whether you have just a simple moral compass, I would think that most of us would agree that there's some immutable elements that are uh, moral. Killing somebody, maybe, for example. Now, there may be, just like there is, we talk about the point within a circle, and each of us have our own due bounds. Some are bigger than others. The idea of, we would call it murder. I guess you'd call it murder to more specifically define it. Killing isn't murder necessarily. And so murdering, what I would say, is something that's specifically um, immoral. But the act of killing may not be immoral if you're defending yourself. So, there's lots of. I don't mean to make this a show about murder, death, and murder, but it's the idea of the philosophy changing and the morality potentially changing and adjusting to civil society. I mean, back when this was written in the 40s and in the even before that, when masonry was kind of coming around, having the sheriff shoot a guy dead in the street was part of their philosophy, part of their morality. It was just, that's how it happened, and it wasn't necessarily thought bad of. So I don't know.
There's definitely the morals of, I always get that mixed up. What are morals and what are ethics, and
Hmm.
I'm sure that's something I should understand better than I do the exact definitions of those words. But yeah, the morals of society have definitely changed over time. there are some things. So there's that, whatever it is. There's a Facebook post out there where um, it has all the different translations, or not translations, but all the different quotations of different religions, essentially saying the golden rule.
Mhm.
Do unto others as you would have them do to you, or as they would have done to themselves, or don't be a jerk. Whatever however you want to phrase that philosophical thing. And it's in so many religions out there that one could reasonably assert that that was a common moral philosophy that
Yeah.
all of mankind aspires to.
Do you think that the seven liberal arts and sciences, we've kind of naturally gravitated to the morality and all that to religious connections? I mean, maybe it's because we are both a little more religious, but do you think that there is kind of an automatic connection between civil liberal arts and sciences in some kind of, what do you want to call it, faith-based or other, uh, uh, I guess, religious experience? I mean, I don't know what else is out there. If I wasn't a Christian, I don't know how I would describe, that experience, right? And if you look back on it, before Christianity was a thing, there was different, not they wouldn't have called them religions then, because we've coined coined that word. So I don't know, belief systems or ideas about celestial beings and powers and concepts, and so maybe there's kind of all interchangeable. I don't know what you think about that. If it's
Yeah, I mean, you can look at the relationship between the Egyptian myths and the Greeks and the Romans, and how that all sort of it. Okay, not a student of such things, but from my outside observations, it all seems to flow like a almost there's like a, I don't know, a river. It flows like a, there's a consistency there that one can say, oh, whatever Thoth or Jehudi or wherever we're supposed to, the
yeah.
word is that became Hermes, became Mercury, and that again, that consistency ties those religion or belief systems together.
And he
I
no, go ahead, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I guess I was just going to say that I kind of feel like, again, as a not a studier of such things, but as a guy who's I've read an article, so I must be know what I'm talking about. That the archetypes that exist in a lot of those stories are common to a lot of, um, if not religions, then certainly the mythos that make up, the backstories of a lot of groups of people around the world.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. For sure. And he even talks about in the beginning of the article that of all the early manuscripts from, Regis being the oldest of them, the Edwin and all the different manuscripts, York and Lansdowne and Cook and Downland, that there seems to be a commonality, even though they didn't necessarily know each other, but there's a commonality of the same thinking through the Middle Ages, that the clergy originally framed these manuscripts seems probable. So he ties it back to even that there is some, religious, if you will, uh, connection to the Holy Trinity in the seven liberal arts and sciences, even though these early writers, weren't necessarily talking to each other about it, but they all came up with these ideas at the similar time. There must be some congruency in their thought processes or beliefs or commonality of things. We had done some years and years ago. We had a little bit of a study group going at our lodge, and we were talking about religion one night, and one of our past masters was talking about how he had done some study on many of the major religions of the world, and they're all, like you're saying, they're all kind of basically the same. There's some differentialities between them, but yeah, do good unto others, and don't kill each other, and just be nice, basically.
I think we've wandered away from geometry, but I guess we're still in the seven liberal arts and
Yeah,
sciences. But
yeah, yeah.
but there is, I mean, I guess I feel like there's, ooh, here, I'll tie it back in. I feel like there is, if we can, it is difficult for me at least, and I'm assuming for others since I've heard this sentiment, to look at the stars or look at, the forest on a beautiful summer day, or to look at the world of creatures and things that are contained within a raindrop under a microscope,
Mm.
and not think, holy crap, there's something going on here.
Yeah.
And a lot of those things, particularly the motion of celestial bodies, the astronomy that predicts their behavior and that
Geometry
explains
measures
the how of it a bit,
yeah.
is based in geometry. There we go. We got back.
Yes.
that geometrical connection to a lot of the way that things behave, from stars in the sky to raindrops,
Yeah.
is based on those geometry that we talk about.
Yeah, for sure. The one of the last things that really hit me was that he was talking about the idea that a man gets up, eats, goes to work, marries, has children, dies, and is a good citizen, but they're not thinking. They just kind of do. They don't really, but he who spends his few days full of trouble and thinking through some problem, philosophy or science, or the greater good of the fellow man and the glory of God. And I hadn't ever really connected that sentence in our ritual, a few days and full of trouble. And so I went back and read it again, and I thought, is that what they're meaning there? I guess it might be. And the idea that the full of trouble piece is the thinking man, the enlightened man and when I hear that, I will think of a whole different aspect of that ritual. And that was probably, of all this is one of my big takeaways, is that I would have heard that ritual and never thought about it. But now when I hear that, I'll think about, oh, he means that we're supposed to be doing this. And so whoever wrote that originally, or whether Webb had his,
That would be the Bible. Yes.
well, yeah, I mean, but was that in the original? I don't know. I don't know the original manuscripts to know.
The few days in full of trouble line is from the book of Job. Yes.
But was that in the original manuscript, or did Webb add that for color and ornamentation when he rewrote the? That's I don't know.
Man that is born of woman is a few days in full of trouble, cut down like a flower, grows forth and whatever. That's from the book of Job in the Bible. Yeah, the King James Version.
Right, but I mean, was that used in the original Masonic rituals? I guess I'm starting to think.
I see.
Or because that's kind of what Webb did, right? The intent wasn't necessarily to change it, but it was to make it more interesting, for sure, right? And so, or Preston and Webb. And so was that added because of that? I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. That's another thing I'd like to spend some time reading about, is the origins of the ritual and what was changed and that sort of thing, and why when you go to Pennsylvania is it completely different.
Sounds like another show.
There you go. So I feel like since we brought it back around to geometry, I feel like we honestly we got a little more deep than I thought we were going to. I'm pleasantly surprised with us. So I want to thank you especially, David, for keeping me on the straight and narrow this week. Your articles and such, I appreciate that, and your tolerance of my not reading them always, but with that, I hope that everything is going well with Stephen up in Kelowna there, and that things are working out for him. And we hope that you will listen to our next episode, and just as importantly, will comment on this one and let us know what you think and what are some thoughts you have on the 7 liberal arts and sciences. And with that, we want to thank you all for listening, and to the Lorking Tools podcast. Goodbye.